The United States doesn't need to look outside its borders to understand what's going on today. I was going to jokingly say that was written by a 10-year-old Native American girl in a reservation in the United States, and I don't think it would have been so ridiculous of a claim. Instead of looking outside of our borders, the United States needs to look at the mirror and recognize its ugly history for what it is.
It is true.
Welcome to the Bewildered Prepared podcast. We're so happy that you guys joined us today. Today, we're going to have an interesting episode. Why is it going to be an interesting episode? Because today, we're going to be telling the news. So in order for the Bewildered Herd to do this segment, we had to bring, of course, our two most valuable guests. And that's Edgar and Carlos. Well, how's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to the Bewildered Herd podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Today, each one of us is going to bring a relevant news topic, something that's trending right now in all of your news outlets, and we're going to discuss about it, right? We're going to have each 10 minutes to maximum to tell you a little bit about what this story is, and then we're going to do 10 minutes of discussion. So we'll see how we do in this segment. So without further ado, let's get going. So who wants to start?
I can start.
All right, Edgar. What's the news story that
All
you
right,
have?
I'm putting 15 minutes on the clock to keep us on track. So yeah, my story is going to be a continuation of what we talked about at the last episode, which was ICE. Specifically, this news story that came out of Minnesota. This is from The Guardian that I'm reading this. So U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detained a 5-year-old Minnesota boy on Tuesday as he returned home from school and transported him and his father to a Texas detention center, according to school officials. His name is Liam Ramos. He's in preschool, and him and his father were taken into custody while in their driveway of their home. The superintendent of the school and district in Columbia Heights, a Minneapolis suburb, said at a press conference on Wednesday. So Liam, he had just turned 5. He's one of 4 children in the school district that has been detained by federal immigration agents during the Trump administration's enforcement surge in the region over Minneapolis. Yeah, him and his dad had just arrived home when they were detained by ICE. And 20 minutes later, Liam's brother came home to a missing dad and a missing brother. The thing that really stuck with me is I want to share my screen. So when I first saw this, I thought it was like AI or I couldn't believe this was real. Man, this one really hit me hard, and it's engraved into my head, probably forever. Because I myself have a young one, almost around the same age. And man, this kid just looks scared, and he looks scared and innocent. And when I hear the president talk about, ICE immigrations and enforcing immigration in this country, he started out talking about getting rid of, drug kingpins, criminal, legals. And I mean, clearly this kid is not any of them. Neither is his dad. They were actually not illegals. They came through a official U.S. point of entry under asylum, and they have an active case that's ongoing. And so they're not illegal aliens. They came legally the way that Trump and MAGA have said, always well, we want legal migration over here. And so these guys came legally here. And the way they were taken, within hours, they were flown to Texas, and now a mom is missing her husband and her 5-year-old child to a concentration camp in Texas. What the hell did this 5-year-old kid do? And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, man. This one it teared me up yesterday when I saw it because I couldn't believe it. The kid just looks so innocent, and he's just following orders. The worst thing that happened is So after they got him and the dad, the ICE officer used him to go to the house and made the kid knock on the door so that, to call for like either his mom or his siblings to see if somebody would come out in an attempt to use him as bait to get, more people. And so I repeat the question again is like, when Trump and MAGA were saying that, ICE and immigration raids were going to be good for this country. Is this kind of like what was envisioned? Does this kind of fit the mold of, what they wanted? You guys see this one? Here's the picture of the ICE agent using the kid as bait. And I think we're fortunate that we live in a world where, things are documented and photographed, because I think this picture is really going to speak to a lot of people. I think this is going to be highly unpopular because, again, like who can defend this? It's almost like indefensible. There is a GoFundMe that the mom started, and I think they're at like 200,000. If anybody's interested in donating, we'll put the link on the description of this episode. But yeah, they need to continue with their ongoing legal case, and obviously at this point, they're going to need a lot more funding to combat that. But yeah, my question is like, how does this make America great again?
Makes America white again.
Is it my understanding then?
Did this happen in Minnesota?
Yeah, in Minnesota. Yeah, and he wasn't the only one. They captured a 10-year-old, and then there was another child, and another one that was really concerning was a 17-year-old. The 17-year-old, still a minor, was taken without any parental consent. Like there was no parents around. This kid, at least he had his dad with him. But the 17-year-old was taken without any parents. So, I mean, that's technically like kidnapping a child. All right. So going back to my question. So then if that's the case, if they want to so are we saying that they want to get rid of all immigrants, legal or illegal? Is that kind of what the real agenda is?
I mean, I don't know. I think if you ask me, this is like smokes and mirrors still. I think the oligarchs are well aware that they need access to a cheap labor force in order for the economy to keep churning. That's been true of, I think, all human economies, right? We've always kind of needed some people from elsewhere to exploit and serve as a cheap labor source. The thing that I think is really important here is that the kid is an unworthy victim, right? He's brown. Can you ever imagine a picture in which that kid is white? That's my question to both of you.
Yeah, I can. I think the way that totalitarian states and fascist states work is, it's freedoms erode little by little. So yeah, right now we're coming after immigrants and people that look like us. After we're gone, then it's the leftist loony liberals. Once they're gone, there's a saying, right? Power rules absolutely. And so once everybody's gone and only MAGA is left, like, I mean, they're going to come for them too. And there are totalitarian states that rule like this. Russia is one example. And yeah, I can see this happening in Russia. And, the color of the people there they're not brown.
Yeah, I should have been more specific. Like, happening
now,
here.
Yeah, happening here right now? No.
Yeah.
But if you keep it up, if you allow these freedoms to become eroded, where you let ICE into your homes, and you're okay with this, sooner or later, once we're gone, then you become the next victim. And it has become normalized. It's become okay to prosecute those that speak up against this and to enter your home.
Yeah, but the fantasy is that once we're gone, everything will go back to being great again. The economy will be excellent. There's going to be no crime. That's the fantasy that they hold on to.
Do you think they're doing this up until the midterm elections, and then after that they'll back off? It's just so people can continue voting for their party, right?
You mean like the ICE rates?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, they have a pretty big budget. I think they're going to continue doing this as long as they get funding. So if in the midterms things don't change, there's not more Democrats elected, then I think Congress will continue to fund ICE and the operations will continue going unless there's like a big shift.
I think it's going to keep going. I think, if everything swings Democrat in the future, these types of organizations that are undemocratic, that are militaristic, they don't atrophy. They don't get smaller. They only get bigger. That's my hypothesis. So whether you have a Democrat or Republican, this big train with a lot of momentum called ICE left the station. And it's going to take a lot for people to stop that momentum from this train of ICE and its raids and its terrorizing communities.
Okay, at what point do you think people will be so outraged and so against it that, they'll will demand that this stops? Is it how many more people need to die or what?
I think people are already outraged. That's why there's protesting, right? It's just that there's a administration that's not gonna submit to their demands, right? I think people are already outraged. I think we're there, but
Yeah, and then with ICE going into homes without warrants, I think sooner or later, aren't they going to run into somebody with a gun? Like what? Right now, they're
I
going in
think
blue states where there's a lot of gun restrictions. But what happens when they go into red states where guns are out in the open?
I
Don't
think
we
that's
all have the castle doctrine where you can defend your home against an intruder, especially if they're
yeah.
masked?
I think that's coming soon. I really think that's coming real soon, and I almost believe that they're waiting for that, and they want that, so that way they can kind of paint it as, oh, you see, someone shot at us now, so we need to defend ourselves more, right? Like a good justification. But I think we're getting close.
Damn.
But it's a very sad situation, I think, especially with seeing those images with the kids. Yeah, I think.
I mean, I want to make a point that I think Trump is maybe at the 1 million mark of deportations, and Obama, I think, deported 3 million. And he's got a way to go, right? The only thing that the Democrats do is that they do this a little more tactful. So if this were happening, say, during the Obama administration, Obama would make sure to take the whole family. He wouldn't separate them, and then he'd lock them up together. And that would appease the conscience of white liberals enough to not make a ruckus. Whereas Trump doesn't care, right? This administration is like, yeah, we're in your face and we'll do whatever we want. And I think that's the difference, optics. This isn't anything new.
Would you say it's flack?
Yeah, I would say it's managing the media. I'd say it's managing the media to distract from what we've mentioned previously, is that Trump doesn't want any discussion into the Epstein files, which less than 1% of the totality of the files have been released to date. I think Edgar or Hoser, I can't remember which one of you guys, mentioned that the date that Maduro was abducted was like the deadline for them to release the files. And it's 20 days later, and still, like, I don't know what's the status of that.
Yeah, nobody's talking about that anymore. I think this is the ice and Greenland is like front and center, right? So yeah, I mean, you're right. It could be flack. And then I think, Carlos, you mentioned before that what happens elsewhere happens here. And it sounds like we were supporting, something like this in Gaza many years ago, and now it's come home. It's come full circle.
Yeah, just a slight correction. We've been supporting it for many years, and it's ongoing, and it's ramping up, like in the West Bank, Gaza. Like, I don't know what's going on over there. But yeah, I'm just looking at statistics from a human rights organization over there called B'Tselem, and they literally have statistics of minors that are in Israeli detention. Like, it's that prevalent, right? And I think the point over there is to inflict the maximum amount of pain and trauma you can on an already vulnerable and traumatized population. Here, I don't know if they're so aware of why they're doing it, or if it's just convenience or plain racism, or both.
I think we're all in the same thought of how this is a big parallel from what we're seeing in the West Bank and in Israel. But I think one of you guys mentioned that maybe they're hiding something, right? Like the Epstein files, right? With all this kind of news, and the news article I have and the news story I had, I thought that this is one of the things that they were trying to hide, especially with all the ICE raids that are going on in Minnesota. So if you guys are okay with, I would like to present my story now. Is that cool? So let me share my screen. I did some research on this. And if you would have asked me this last week, I would have told you, yes, like this is what's going on. But now I have my doubts. So pretty much, I don't know if you guys are kind of aware, but right now there's one of the biggest viral news stories that's going on right now is the infamous Minnesota daycare fraud allegations. It started from this YouTuber whose name is Nick Shirley. He made a video where he was in Minnesota, and he recorded several daycare centers that appear to be empty or inactive. And the thing about these daycare centers is that they have been receiving millions of dollars over the past year in taxpayer funds. And so the idea behind this video that he recorded was that he went to different daycare centers, and he tried to just go in and ask how he can enroll a kid, and all of them were locked. The problem with this situation is that most of them, if not all of the daycare centers that he recorded, seem to be Somali run. So in his video, along with the guy that he was doing the video with, this is one of the centers that he was looking at. He mentioned that there's a big fraud, right? These taxpayers are putting their money into these funds, and these funds are going to these daycare centers where there's no kids. That's the claim that he's making. Now, it's becoming very viral, and now it's getting a lot of attention in the media, and it's been gaining attention by the federal government. So much so that the Trump administration has actually stopped any federal funding to daycare centers into the state of Minnesota, which that's kind of huge, right? Because that kind of impacts a lot of kids, a lot of parents who need daycare services. But the idea here is that they're calling it a web of fraud that's going on in Minnesota with regards to these daycare centers. But so last week, when I was kind of learning about this, I was like, wow, these guys are discovering fraud from all these facilities, right? And to me, this is a politician problem, right? This is a problem where your politicians are just giving money away. They're just putting your taxpayer money into some fund, and they're not telling you where it's going, and you hope that it's going somewhere that it needs it. But this video made it seem like they don't, right? And I guess this has been something going on for the last 10 years in Minnesota. And this video just kind of brought it to light this year. But I guess there's been constant reporting and constant fraud allegations within the daycare centers. So the crazy thing now is that with this story, this YouTuber, Nick Shirley, went into the Congress and to the House, and he had they kind of interviewed him, and they kind of asked him questions about his fraud findings. And he also he just made the claim that California is even worse. And I have an article here that says that an audit found that California spent $24 billion on homelessness in 5 years, but the outcomes don't track. So where I'm getting at is that I think a lot of states are getting the light shined on them to see how they're spending their taxpayers' money. My problem with this, though, is two of them. Number one, as I was looking more into this guy and the content that he was producing, I realized that the other guy that was with him, his name is just David. He not only is talking about exposing the fraud, right? Taxpayer money, which I agree with. I'm like, hey, let's look into it. But he's also kind of blaming the Somali community for this. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, I think just they're Somali run, and like some of them, like the videos, the daycare centers that they recorded were Somali run, but I don't think all Somalis are doing fraud, right? And so, but they're kind of pushing that narrative now. And yesterday I saw another Congress hearing where a congressman from Texas, he was questioning a politician from Minnesota, and instead of asking questions about like, hey, like, tell me how you spent this money, he kind of started asking questions of how many Somalis are in welfare, how many Somalis are in food stamps or something like that. And so where I'm getting at is that there's this story that's getting a lot of national attention. The focus should still be on the fraud or on where the taxpayer money is going. And I think now it's turning into this the Somalis are trying to take our hard-earned money from our taxes. So I guess today my question is like, what do you guys think? Have you guys heard about this new story? And if so, do you guys agree with me that it's becoming now an attack on the Somali community?
Yeah, I've heard of this story, and I mean, regarding fraud, yeah, I did read that Minnesota was the number one state that engaged in fraudulent activity during the pandemic, when there was huge incentives from the federal government for those to keep businesses alive and whatnot. You guys remember that stimulus package that passed during COVID?
Mm-hmm.
So apparently Minnesota was the state that abused it the most in terms of fraud. And so yeah, I think any fraud should be investigated. I think any business entity that's getting funding from the state or the federal government, either through a loan or through a grant, yeah, of course there should be audits. And I think there are systems in place to do that are baked into the system. If there's a concern that there's widespread fraud, then we can increase those departments, give them more people to engage in reporting and auditing. And my point is, like, yeah, we have the proper channels to go through all of that. Now, this guy in particular, what's his name? David?
Well,
David Hodge?
the YouTuber is Nick Shirley, but I
Okay.
don't know the other guy. The other guy is, I think his name is, they just call him David. I don't know what his last name is.
David Hodge, the lobbyist and former right-wing candidate for Minnesota Attorney General, who serves as the main source in Shirley's video. I mean, that guy is like super racist. He hates the Somali community. He said in an Instagram post, every Somali in Minnesota is engaged in fraud. All of them. Even the blacks have had enough of the demon Muslims, he said in November. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear what, this guy's investigative agenda is. And I think he has an agenda, like you said, Hoser, against a particular Somali community.
Yeah.
And it's quite a stretch to go from, like, we don't even know yet if they're engaged in fraud or not. But, this guy's like painting them as guilty, and then it's being echoed by the president, by conservative news reports, without even giving them a chance to defend themselves. And so, I mean, I think it's pretty clear what's going on.
Yeah, and just to spell it out, like, it's not just that guy David, it's also Nick Shirley. Like, I think Nick Shirley probably admires Charlie Kirk, right? He's definitely right wing. He released a video in 2024 in which he went to El Salvador, and he was in Secot, in that high security prison. And then in October in 2025, apparently he had a meeting, a roundtable discussion with Trump and other right-wing figures. And then he's just made bullshit claims. Like, he claimed that in Portland, Oregon, Antifa had taken over. And, it's not the case. Like, I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean for Antifa to take over? Like, that they're running the city? Like, that they have their mayors? Like, what? We could just go on and on, but like, I could just go back to a comment I said, like, how tall is Nick Shirley? Like, is he like 5'4", 5'5"? Because he's a big fucking stack of shit, whatever his height is. Like, so despicable of an individual that guy is to me. That's one point. And then the other point is like, okay, so what's the number being thrown around of this so-called fraud that is so prevalent in Minnesota? Does any one of you have that number handy?
Yeah, it was like $8 billion.
What?
Okay, great. Let's stop there. The amount of fraud that the white-collar community does, estimated by the FBI every year, runs from 300 billion to 600 billion. Okay, with a big B. So we know a little bit of math. Us here studied engineering. Go ahead and make that fraction. 9, 10, if you want, over 300. Why isn't this story, the white-collar fraud that the FBI estimates happens annually in the United States, not getting the traction that this other story that Nick, piece of shit, put out? It goes back, in my opinion, to Flack. I think one of the news sources that you shared, Hoser, was CBS. And we've talked previously here that CBS was just acquired by Paramount Skydance. And this is Larry Ellison. the richest man on the planet, on and off, competing with Elon Musk. The dude's a Zionist, right-winger, accredited with launching the political career of Marco Rubio. So you can already tell that this is a right-wing agenda being given traction on CBS and, of course, on the New York Post. Now, having said all that, like all propaganda, and I mean all propaganda, including the most vile you can imagine, it has to be based on a shred of truth. And clearly the video suggests something like that, right? Like they went over there, they were kind of like, oh, kind of hiding. And it's like, well, where's 100 kids? Like, who are you? Like, leave us alone, right? And so it's propaganda, but again, going back to that fraction of 10 billion over 300 to 600 billion of corporate fraud that happens annually in this country, it makes no sense in a rational mind why we would be paying more attention to fraud committed in Minnesota, say, to the fraud that's committed year in and year out by the white collar community here in the United States.
Yeah, and
And
so
not to
sorry.
mention, and we all remember the 2008 financial crisis. The bailout was $700 billion that went to the banks for fraud that they committed. Nobody went to jail. Nobody was investigated. In fact, in 2025, the Trump administration significantly reduced the IRS workforce, specifically targeting the audit department that specializes in auditing, millionaires and billionaires. So I don't know if you guys remember, but under the Biden administration, they were trying to increase that department so that they could generate more revenue by actually taxing the wealthy individuals that owe taxes into the U.S., right, to the federal government. And the thinking was that instead of focusing on the smaller single home units and trying to get peanuts out of them, why don't we go after the real like big millionaires and billionaires that have been committing fraud for decades unchecked. But then in comes Trump and he cuts that department almost in half. And so, yeah, I mean, it goes back to fitting the agenda of like, let's go after these smaller, poorer communities and target them.
Yeah.
Even though the majority of the crime is being committed not by them.
But I think if they pull it, I like what Carlos said, a shred of truth. Because what I ended up, my final conclusion is that if you pull this thread enough, eventually it's not just going to be a Democrat thing. It's going to be a Republican thing too. And you're going to see there's like, everyone has a tail on this, right? And
yeah,
so
if you audit enough, like you blanket audit, like you go into the other communities, the richer, more affluent communities, you're going to find stuff there too.
Yeah, so I think this is why they're limiting to the Somalis and be like, oh, let's focus on them. Like, this is where the buck stops. So that was my news story for today. Minnesota is just getting hit by so much national attention that's pretty negative. So good luck, Mayor Fry. All right.
Doesn't Trump have an agenda against the Minneapolis mayor and governor against Minnesota? Because you mentioned that he stopped all funding for daycares.
Yeah, he did.
Just blanket like that, like.
Because they're gonna do investigation on the fraud situation.
Okay, so punish everyone for potential crimes that they may or may not have committed?
Well, I think probably some have. I mean, but
how do you know that?
Well, yeah,
because
don't.
I'm
assuming.
History?
Because of the history, yeah. Because they've been. This is something that's been kind of constant since 2013, according to one of the Minnesota like local channels there. But I think, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because there's probably someone doing it right, and now they're getting affected. But anyways, so that's my story, Carlos.
Hey, before we go to Carlos's, can I read something that ties back to my ICE story?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna read something that resonated with me. This is Wednesday, 13th January 1943. Dear Kitty, this morning I was constantly interrupted, and as a result, I haven't been able to finish a single thing I've begun. Terrible things are happening outside. At any time of night and day, poor, helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. They're allowed to take only a rucksack and a little cash with them, and even then, they're robbed of these possessions on the way. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared. Women return from shopping to find their houses sealed and their families gone. You guys know who wrote that?
Anne Frank.
Yep.
Tell you, man, it's like
I mean,
it's the Jewish thing, man.
my comment is that the United States doesn't need to look outside its borders to understand what's going on today, right? I was going to jokingly say that that was written by a 10-year-old Native American girl in a reservation in the United States. And I don't think it would have been so ridiculous of a claim, right? So I said last episode that we talked about ICE, that ICE is the descendants of those 1704 slave patrols in whatever Carolina that happened, right? And you could just go down the line to where they trace their heritage. So instead of looking outside of our borders, the United States needs to look at the mirror and recognize its ugly history for what it is.
Yeah. I think my point was just that, this happened in 1943, and if you don't know your history, history is doomed to repeat itself.
Right. We agree there because clearly Americans live in the United States of amnesia. So,
All right.
Yep.
cool. So I need to preface my story by saying that, I can't do it justice in 10 minutes. So I'm just going to graze the surface of this. But I think that I focus on this because, like I shared with you guys, what we enable somewhere else can definitely come to happen over here. And I think lately we've seen some of that. I think Edgar's story speaks to that. So I want to just discuss the surface of this board of peace that Trump has created. And just from the name, like I already feel uneasy at how Orwellian it sounds, board of peace. I'll read some statistics, The term ceasefire also, in this context, seems very Orwellian. So the total casualty counts since the ceasefire, since last October, the first full day of the ceasefire, Israel has killed at least 477 Palestinians and wounded 1,300. There's been 713 bodies that have been recovered from under the rubble. Okay, so what kind of ceasefire is that? In my mind, it's not a ceasefire. There never was a ceasefire. The genocide is ongoing, right? And so now Trump, with his board of peace at a signing ceremony in Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum, is proposing that we move on to phase 2, whatever that means for your average Palestinian. Anyway, the body was first conceived to kind of oversee the ceasefire in Gaza, but its charter doesn't limit its roles to just Gaza. Trump said that it would be one of the most consequential bodies ever created in the history of the world, and that the board is going to be very successful in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu joined, surprise, surprise, after having some reservations about it. Netanyahu needs a continual state of war to, keep at bay domestic trials he has against his past dealings. And Netanyahu didn't attend the ceremony in Switzerland because he was afraid that he was going to be arrested for war crimes in Gaza. So that's a little bit of poetic justice. At that same ceremony in which the Board of Peace was presented, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, presented a master plan for Gaza. And it was essentially some type of AI fantasy in which Gaza gets developed into this like tourist haven. And it's essentially I don't know what to call it, autocrat wet dream, this Board of Peace. We'll just go over the layout of how it's organized, and it's really dystopian, I think. So the structure of this Board of Peace has as chairman, Mr. in quotes, Donald Trump, the orange man himself. And he's not subject to any term limits. He's a member for life, right? So he's the chairman of this Board of Peace that he created, and he installed himself as the chairman with no term limits and a member for life. The Board of Peace has made a lot of invitations. About 60 countries received invitations to join. Not a lot of countries have been interested because they see what it is, right? If you have Donald Trump as emperor, and then under the emperor's direction is the executive board, which is mainly focused on diplomacy and investment. And then underneath that executive board, you have the Gaza executive board that is actually composed with people from Gaza that are meant to implement the desires coming from above, right? And so this in this board of peace, there's no mention of Palestine. There's no mention of Palestinians. There's no mention of Gaza. There's no mention of the right of return. And there's sure as hell no mention of a right to self-determination by the Palestinians. So this is essentially like a whitewashed plan to take over Gaza, which is what we've been saying here on this podcast is the ultimate goal. This is nation building. This is gathering investments to redevelop a location that has an ongoing genocide. And it's being whitewashed with names that would make Orwell chuckle by characters that would make Orwell wrench and vomit. And I find it important because, as I kind of preface the discussion, what we enable elsewhere can come to pass here where we are, especially if we're not aware of the full details. Something similar has happened and been happening in Puerto Rico for a long time. Puerto Rico, in my opinion, is a colony of the United States. They don't have a representative in either Congress or the Senate, to my knowledge. And their economy is dictated by what is called the fiscal board. The fiscal board is essentially a bunch of bankers that decides how Puerto Rico is going to spend its allocated federal funding. And so, in my mind, what better example of a colony is that, right? I think the goods that enter Puerto Rico have to first come through a U.S. port where there's some money with tariffs and money exchanging hands. And then it goes into Puerto Rico at a marked up price, similar to what happened in Hawaii and what happens in Hawaii, which is why products in those islands tend to be a little bit more expensive than on the mainland. If Puerto Rico were to be a U.S. state, it would be poorer than Mississippi, right? The only difference, a big difference between Puerto Rico and Gaza is that, there's not a brutally violent genocide that's ongoing. I'm sure some people will claim that there is a type of genocide going on in Puerto Rico in which the native population is being replaced by people the likes of Logan Paul, these white dumb fucks from the mid nowhere who have money and go over there, decide to buy a piece of paradise, raise the price of living for the local population, and essentially displace them, and having local Puerto Ricans come to the United States to work because they can't afford to live anymore in their countries.
Wait, are you talking about Logan Paul and Jake Paul?
Exactly.
Oh, really?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, they live in Puerto Rico. One of them does. So
Yeah, they do it for tax purposes,
there you go.
which comes back to the fraud. How he was saying white collar fraud. Like, here we are talking about $8 billion in fraud within daycare centers. Yet there's these wealthy folks in the country that have YouTube videos that tell you, hey, this is how you can escape the tax law. And to me, it's like, hey, isn't that somewhat like fraud? Well, or rob.
I mean, if they're following the law, whatever, right? They're playing the game. But if you're breaking the law, yeah. So anyway, the point I make is that this board of peace is a disgrace. It's a totalitarian structure set up by Trump in which he has veto power. He's emperor for life. Even if, after he's president of the United States, he still has control over that. And the cast of characters that have decided to join are unsavory and bloodthirsty vampires, the likes of Tony Blair, responsible in part of the invasion in Iraq in 2003, maybe, and his little shit-faced son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and big ears Marco Rubio, who finally got his way in Venezuela.
And then he also invited Russia, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping from China, and the ones that are not joining is France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Norway, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, United Kingdom. Canada had accepted, but then after the speech that the prime minister gave at that Davos conference or whatever, he withdrew. How freaking comedic is that, dude?
Some of the countries here that actually joined are Bahrain, Morocco, Argentina, Armenia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Kazakhstan,
Which is
Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi
a
Arabia.
lot of authoritarian regimes, and it's it's just weird, man, because the whole thing is like we already have the United Nations, we already have NATO. Why do we need to create this other board of peace?
So
And
Trump,
our like real allies are the ones that we're like kind of going against. They're not joining this board of peace, and instead we're inviting these like authoritarian regimes, right? So it just doesn't make sense.
Trump has hinted that he considers that the Board of Peace might replace the UN, which is interesting, funny, and a little disturbing. But yeah, he's just disrupting things,
And yeah, and he keeps pissing. Yeah, I just think this whole thing is like not good for the United States in the long run, pissing off our allies that have been with us for hundreds of years by his call to like take over Greenland. It's kind of embarrassing that our own friends and allies have to defend themselves from us and protect a piece of country that belongs to them from us, and we just keep alienating our friends and allies that one day we might need them. I just don't see how this could be good for the United States in the long run. Do you guys what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's good for the US or is it good for Donald Trump? I also heard that they have to pay like $1 billion to get in.
Yeah,
the club.
that's $1 billion if you wanna have a permanent seat on the Board of Peace.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that just smells like, hey, this is a money making opportunity. If you want to join, like it's $1 billion. But yeah, I think the question you asked hit the nail right in the head. It's not good for the United States. It's good for the, bottom line of Donald Trump. And that's how he's managed the presidency. Not necessarily thinking what's good for the country, but what's good for his bank account. I think I've read some reports somewhere that since his second term, his family has revenues of upwards of $1 billion or something like that.
And going back to the comment I made about weakening the IRS, specifically the audit department, he's prepping himself for future endeavors.
Man, that's just crazy. So with those three stories, how does that make you guys feel about where we're heading?
Like I think Carlos said, it sounds very Orwell. Just the name made me laugh. It's like the Board of Peace, and they got people that are not very peaceful. That are engaging in wars, calling for empire building. It's the complete opposite of peace.
Yeah, this is somewhat unrelated too, but I recently found out that my intellectual hero was a very dear associate of Jeffrey Epstein and
Noam Chomsky?
Noam Chomsky himself. And I'm really disappointed in a lot of the news sources I follow because they've kept that hush-hush. And I think it's because Noam Chomsky is like a godfather to a lot of them. A lot of these journalists look up to Noam Chomsky to kind of see through the BS that permeates our world. And, I was really disturbed to see a picture with Noam Chomsky and Steve Bannon at Jeffrey Epstein's house. And Noam Chomsky is looking up to Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon is just like, ha, 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 like chuckling, looking at the camera. And then there's other pictures of Noam Chomsky flying on the Lolita Express is what they call it, with Jeffrey Epstein on his private jet. Noam Chomsky has gone on the record to defend his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He says that he had many fruitful discussions with him and that he learned a lot about how the financial sector operated because of all his connections and shit. But to me, that just kind of brings back Chomsky down to the level of human. Noam Chomsky is just a man, or was a man. I don't know if he's alive or dead, but it really discredits a lot of the respect that I had for him. I really, lost a lot of faith on what academia is. And a lot of what Chomsky writes about how intellectuals are in cahoots or in bed with the state, and how intellectuals are dishonest, and how intellectuals are perpetuating the status quo, I now interpret as Noam Chomsky looking at himself in the mirror and describing who he is and who his connections are. So in other words, I'm saying that Noam Chomsky is a big fucking hypocrite if he kept those types of friends around him.
I mean, even more reason why they need to release the entirety of the Epstein files. Right or left, liberal, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter, man. They all need to be brought to justice.
And to me, that kind of shows you what I've been saying. Eventually, human nature is corrupted, man. I think another thing is like for today, to wrap it up today, I wanted to end with a positive note, right? A positive story. Would you guys believe me that in a week I couldn't find something happy?
I could find something happy for you right now. Just keep talking.
Well, thank you, Carlos, but I couldn't, and so that kind of brought it to me that it's like it's that conversation we've been having about the media. They really want to put this on your like all the negative. It's what they want you to be focused on, and in a way, it's like the media is feeding that corruption of human nature, and I think it almost seems like you kind of need a savior, right?
So here's a bunch of news, and it's on Reddit. It's called Uplifting News. So San Francisco just made childcare free for families earning up to $230,000 a year. That seems very common sense. There's another one here.
That would be good for us, but
positive.
if you say that in red states, that's not good news.
Yeah, well, here's another one. U.S. Senator introduces One Fair Act price, legislation that would prohibit businesses from using personal information they collect about customers to charge people different prices for the same products. Seems very common sense to me. Like, you shouldn't charge people different prices for the same product based on who they are. And then here's another one. There's a new filtration technology that could be a game changer in removal of PFAS or the forever chemicals in the water.
That's good.
So there's a few. Going back to that human nature discussion, Hoser, I think it's the system that corrupts us. I think that overall people are good because we needed to cooperate before we created sedentary societies. And that's why when you see a human in distress, you naturally gravitate to try to help as best as you can. I think more people are like that than the opposite of like, oh, a human in distress? Good luck. There are some people like that for sure, but I think the majority want to help.
And you know what? I was thinking about it, especially since the last ICE episode. I've been really thinking about that comment that I made. And I think I could retract that a bit. You're right. I think from the beginning, humans were made in the image of God. And society corrupted it. And in a way, it's kind of what you're saying. Originally, we were meant to be like that. But now, it's not like that. So, I think it's very negative to kind of think like that. But it's the reality. I don't know if you guys prefer hearing the reality or a positive thought, but I like the last the positive notes that you ended with. What was the subreddit again?
Uplifting News.
Uplifting News. I think we'll write that on the description, because I think with so much stuff on the news right now, I mean, we just kind of quickly touch on 3 stories, and you could already feel it, right? You can feel the heaviness of them, or just kind of like something's not right? But we do need some other news.
There's nothing we could do about the stories, right? Like, what the hell can we do about the Board of Peace?
Oh, yeah.
What the hell can we do about ICE? What the hell can we do about the fraud? We can't do anything. So I think we need to focus on what we can do for ourselves and on the relationships that we have with the people that matter to us. Eat healthy, exercise, try to sleep well. Don't be a dick. Simple.
Yeah, that's right. Because at the end of your life, you're not going to think like, oh, this Board of Peace. Like, in your deathbed, you're not going to be thinking about the Board of Peace. You're not going to be thinking about the fraud in Minnesota. You're going to be thinking about your relationships, right? Your families, your kids. And so I like that. I like that statement. All right, gentlemen. So I think this is a good spot to kind of wrap it up. Thank you guys for your stories. Thank you, viewer, for watching our news story segment. There's something new. We try to bewildered herd. So yeah, so that's all we have for today. Thank y'all for joining us. A little bit more gloom today than doom. So, all right, everyone. Thank you guys for joining today, and we'll talk later.
Peace.
Peace.
I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. And though the news was rather sad, well, I just had